Hello, all. Busy hockey weekend as usual. The weekend before American Thanksgiving. I know that I was particularly busy, Russ, driving to Rochester and St. Catharines and Toronto over the last few days, seeing some AHL and OHL hockey. We'll talk about that later because I saw.
I'll tell you, I was busy driving around for onion soup mix and a turkey and whatever. I do a lot of the cooking, so I was doing that.
Oh yeah, well I'm gonna be doing that stuff too. I'm sure Canadians. You had your Thanksgiving, 6 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. It's a whole process. Tomorrow I have to go over to my mom's and make about a metric ton of stuffing because everybody loves her stuffing, and I chop up the celeries and the onions and all that stuff and mix it all up, and so we all do it. We all pitch in.
Got to do the grunt work.
Yes, yeah. And the thing is, this is the thing, and I'm sure everybody sympathizes with this. It's 2 to 3 days of work, of cooking, of preparation.
Well, you can cut some corners if you want to. Like, you could get already cleaned and cut green beans if you want to. There are some ways to save on the corners, but you're right, it's still a lot of work.
Yeah, for 45 minutes of just stuff in your face.
Gluttony,
yeah. And the thing is, it's like
45 minutes of gluttony because that turkey lives on for weeks.
Well, I was gonna say I love my mother dearly, but it's 5 people in our immediate family that will have dinner, and she buys a 22-pound turkey.
Yeah. My parents go crazy about that too.
I mean, it's just it's insane.
I was looking for small. I was looking for like 12 to 15. I had to settle on like 15 as a small.
Yeah, it's too much. But anyway, I wanted before Kevin Allen is supposed to join us. Before we start, I saw a little bit of humorous news, and it's always it doesn't matter what sport. When you have a player who hits free agency, and he decides to take a few, in this instance, the contract that was offered by the team outside of the team that he had played his entire career with was 3 years, and it was 3 years more at around the same amount of money. But Robinson Cano, who was with the Yankees for, I think, 8 years, was offered by the Yankees $25 million for 7 years, $175 million total contract. A deal that, as a Yankee fan, I was like, please no, because this is another guy who's going to be 38 years old and he's going to be making $25 million and he's going to stink. Thankfully, Cano didn't take it, and he went to Seattle for the big money. He signed a deal that was
his family. I get it.
Right. He signed a deal that was almost equivalent to the A-Rod deal in Texas a few years back. And now, 2 years into the deal, there's a report on CBS Sports website that Cano wants to go back to New York.
If I were in ownership in Seattle, I'd walk up to him and say, hey, if you want to go out to New York, here's the contract. Just void it out.
Yeah, but you can't do that.
You probably could. I mean, he probably could void a contract if he wanted to. If he wanted to walk away from it and take a year off from baseball, he probably can do it.
Well, I mean,
but no player's going to do it.
He has to blame Jay-Z here because Jay-Z was his representative.
The money. That's an agent's job.
Well, right. And he fired Boris and he hired Jay-Z.
It's up to him to decide what's best for him as far as living arrangements and what he likes. Mm-hmm. Jay-Z did his job. He got him money.
Now, granted, the Yankees, and right now their second base situation is going to be like Dustin Ackley and Rob Refsnyder. But I honestly, even if Seattle took back A-Rod and CC Sabathia, I don't want Cano back.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, and the Met fans would love him too, but they're not paying him. So you know what, he's going to live out his days in Seattle, or he'll become Mike Hampton, and in 3 or 4 years, he'll get traded, and Seattle will pay an amount, and then 2 more years after that, he'll get traded, and then that team will pay part of his salary. Remember, like 5 teams were paying Mike Hampton's salary at one point, it seemed.
Yeah, I mean, and switching to football here for a second, that parity has, I mean, we see it in hockey right now. We look at the standings, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But in the NFL,
it's crazy.
It's honestly, it makes the game unwatchable. You've got how many teams in the AFC right now at 5-5, including your New York Jets and probably my Buffalo Bills.
If I had to guess, I would say it's 5, but I don't even know.
Yeah, I think it is 5. I mean, and Buffalo Bills will join them at 5-5 today after they lose to the Patriots.
Right.
But it's, I mean, honestly, I find the NFL almost unwatchable now, because if it's not an injury or a flag or a replay,
yeah, it's getting a little harder. There's not enough action now.
Yeah, it's dreadful. And
I like formations. I like plays. I like flow in game. There's less flow in the game, and that's a big problem. But I will say this: you'll be very happy. What time is it? It's 1 o'clock, 10 after 1. By 3 o'clock, I'm sure Quentin Coples will be knocking on the Buffalo Bills door, and you will sign Quentin Coples, former Jets first-round pick, because they cut him. So good luck with that.
So he can play alongside IK. And yeah, wow.
Well, listen, Rex will have some of his buddies back. You'll be happy.
This is the thing. It's like, this shows how out of the loop I am. I don't even know what position Coples plays.
He doesn't know either. He that's the thing. He's been playing out of position for so long. He is a defensive end. He's a pass rusher. He has freakishly long arms. He's supposed to block passes. He blocks like 1 or 2 a year. He's supposed to be a sack guy. He gets a couple, 3-4 sacks a year. He's, obviously was Rex Ryan's pick. And I think he kind of bullied the Jets into taking him. And he's a great athlete. He's not a great football player.
Well,
he'll look good in Bills blue, though.
You're probably right, because I mean, they've lost.
They'll cut IK and they'll sign Copel.
No, they won't have to, because I think I'm sure we're boring hockey fans here, and we'll get started in a second. But Kyle Williams, their defensive tackle, is probably out for the year. I saw a report over the weekend. Okay. So if they do that, they put him on injured reserve, and they can pick up this guy if he is a Rex Ryan favorite. But if he picked up IK, he'll pick up this guy if he's a first-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a favorite. He's just a guy that's a project for Rex Ryan, and he's still a project. All right, let's talk hockey.
Okay. Kevin is trying to get in. I sent him another invite, so hopefully we'll get in there. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, November 23rd, 2015.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Russ, we're like we said, we're getting close to American Thanksgiving, which is sort of the line of demarcation for potential trades to start happening. We've had a few.
Can we talk the trade thing? Can we talk about the one-liner that you sent me about, and I just saw online about Jake Voracek being demoted to the fourth line?
Yeah, we can start with that. I mean,
let's start with that, because that is an antiquated coaching tactic that no longer works in the NHL. Because for one thing, the fourth line's kind of a blur anyhow, as we've talked about. And you get someone of Jake Voracek's skill, and now you're going to put him with the least skilled guys on your team. I got to tell you, that's what Columbus did with him, and that's what made him available in the trade eventually for the Flyers. You can't do that. That would be like, and he's not Ovechkin, right? But you can't put Ovechkin on the fourth line if he's slumping. You don't do it to Crosby. They should not be doing it to Voracek. But I'm telling you, Dave Haxtell is just rotating players because of what you said, where there's tightness in the cap and they can't do a lot and they can barely call up youngsters. And they have a couple of youngsters they called up. And now he's just, he's playing musical chairs, but he's the wrong guy to play musical chairs with. He is.
Well, I mean, they played a quarter of the season with Voracek playing with Giroux, and it hasn't worked. He has, I believe, 1 goal. I'm
not saying he has to stay with Giroux. I'm not even saying he shouldn't be on the second line. Juggle that up. Don't put him on the fourth line. Come on.
Yeah, well, I mean, I get it. I do get it. But, oh, here we go. Hey, Kevin.
Hey there.
Not sure what the problem was, but I'm glad you finally got through. Yeah. We were just starting the show. There was a report today regarding the Philadelphia Flyers moving Jake Voracek, who they just signed for what was it, over $8 million for 8 years, Russ?
Yep.
But they're moving him down to the fourth line because he has struggled mightily. I believe he has 1 goal in 20 or 21 games. Not to say that, I mean, Dave Haxtell, he coached a long time at North Dakota. I'm sure, there are a lot of people have confidence that he'll be a pretty good NHL coach, but the way the Flyers have struggled, we know that this is a rebuilding team, but you would think that he would be able to get the most out of the star players, and Voracek really has not come forward or come through right now early in the season for them.
Well, I would agree, and to me, it's really, you have to be alarmed if you're a Philadelphia Flyers fan right now, because they haven't really truly committed to any level of rebuilding, and they're trying to change on the fly here, and yet it seems like they're being a little too patient, much more patient than an Ed Snyder team has been in the past. I can't see them trading Voracek. I think we've seen other top players around the league, Ryan Getzlaf, Sidney Crosby. There are other players that are struggling. I think it's harder to score a goal now than it's been in the past. So I think they're going to have to be a little bit more patient. Plus, the one thing that you can say in Philadelphia is that there has been an adjustment period to Hackstall's coaching style. I don't think there's any question about that. Yep. So you wonder whether that fits in as part of the equation as well.
Well, it was before you came on the show. We were talking about Robbie Cano, in Seattle, who he has 8 years left in his contract, making like $25 million, and all of a sudden he's asking. He basically is saying he doesn't like it in Seattle and is considering. He would like to go back to New York. And the thing is, with that contract, unless Seattle eats half of it or does something of that nature, his contract is immovable. But there are players in the NHL. I mean, Voracek just signed this 8-year extension. He's making $8 million a year. He's a really good young player. Still in his early to mid 20s. Had a fantastic year last season, but not many teams are going to trade unless they're getting them for basically nothing. Not many teams are going to trade for a guy who's making $8 million a year.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I mean, the other question worth asking is, does it really make sense to move Voracek down on the fourth line? Like,
that's what we were talking about. I mean, you're playing him with Bellemare and Van de Velde. How is that possibly going to help?
Yeah. Well, in theory, the idea is that you treat everyone the same, and if you're not producing, you pay a price for it. The problem with that is that everybody understands that life is not the same. That and a lot of the guys on the Flyers team, I'm sure, are thinking, how is this a good idea? That one of our best players is on the fourth line. So it's complicated because what sort of leverage does a coach have over a top player to get him to perform if he can't cut his ice time or reduce his ice time? To me, a benching makes more sense than a.
I would agree. I would agree because playing him with less skilled guys is just going to frustrate him like he was in Columbus. Maybe not for a game, or if he does it for just a game, okay, fine. But I don't think it proves much of a point. Put him with Couturier. Both those guys are struggling. Maybe they help each other out. They're both skilled guys. Don't send him down to the fourth line. Vinny Lecavalier is now getting moved up, and he wasn't even playing him. It just shows that when a coach is having trouble and he's a new coach and guys are having trouble picking up the system, that he's willing to do almost anything, and that's what he's basically doing.
Yeah, it shows a little bit of desperation right now on the part of Haxtell. Let's move on here, but the name that has been popping up over the last few days, especially over the weekend, has been Travis Hamonic, the defenseman of the New York Islanders. It came out late last week that he had requested a trade going even back to the summer, and that Garth Snow hasn't been able to make any kind of deal. Russ, I know I said on one of the webcasts when that broke that if there wasn't a direct connection to one of those 3 or 4 teams in Western Canada, that it might open up to the possibility of a 3-way deal because I don't know. I look at those 3 or 4 teams. I don't see a matchup, a mix. And reportedly, Garth Snow was talking to Calgary and asked for T.J. Brody for Hamonic. I think he's barking up the wrong tree.
See, that goes to my initial point about Travis Hamonic. He's not a top 2 pairing defenseman on any other team. Most teams in the NHL, he wouldn't be there. I mean, you could find a few. There's probably 5 teams he could be a top pairing. Calgary's not going to be one of them.
Right.
and he doesn't have a lot of offense. So why in the world would I trade an offensive defenseman who's just not as good as Hamonic defensively, but close for Hamonic? I wouldn't. And that's the problem that Garth Snow is having. He either needs to play his kids, bring up Pulock and Mayfield, and see what he's got there, and get something else and not a defenseman, or he needs to take just another defenseman and get a forward and deal with that, because he's never going to get what he deems as equal value, and I think that's a big problem here.
Now, Kevin, there were 22 scouts at the Islanders Montreal game last night. I would assume most of them were there to look at Hamonic, although, Hamonic is a known commodity, so I don't know what going to a game and watching him play really tells them. But what is your read on this situation in terms of, do you think he is locked in on that group of maybe 4 to 6 teams in Central or Western Canada, or do you think there's a possibility that that list could be expanded?
Well, I think it can be expanded a little bit. Obviously Minnesota is close to his native Manitoba. It's a short plane ride, and that's really all you're hoping for anyway. Unless you're going to trade him to the Jets. And I actually agree with what you said, Mike. This is a very difficult situation for Garth Snow. His career could almost be defined by it. Let's not forget that the Islanders are in contention here. This is a real good team, and whether he is a top pairing defenseman or he isn't, on the Islanders he is.
Right.
And they have to get someone back to replace him. And to me, because I did the same thing you did, I've looked at those teams, and there's not a good fit for a trade. And even Minnesota, it doesn't make much sense for them either. So to me, what you're going to have to do, and three-way trades are really difficult to do.
Yeah.
That's why they rarely happen. But you can still call it a three-way trade if you just acquire assets that you either then may be able to move elsewhere, or put them in your lineup and then move someone else. For example, if you traded for a forward, if you had worked with Edmonton and got, say, Yakupov back as part of a deal, and then maybe you trade Okposo to get the defenseman that you need, or maybe you trade Yakupov to get the defenseman you need. The Islanders can't afford to just give up a guy and play kids. They're in contention.
Right.
So I think this is a very difficult thing, and I think no team in the NHL is heartless, but I think you got to go to Hamonic and say, look, we'll do the best we can, but we're trying to win here, and if it requires him to give him 4 days off in the middle of the season, or let him take a game off and go home for 3 or 4 days, whatever you got to do. When there's 2 days off between games, fly him home. In that regard, do what you can. I think you can't just accommodate them and not get back compensation that can keep you in the running. I think this is I think our Snow just has to have patience on that, and Hamonic does as well.
Yeah,
the possibility. Sorry. Kev, what about the possibility that this gets to the point where after the season he says, I got to walk away from hockey? Then what? But
it's easier to trade him in the off season.
Right.
You could make this trade easy with Edmonton or Winnipeg, because he could help. He's a competitive guy. That's his strength.
Mm-hmm.
He's a competitive guy, as you know, and he's playing more minutes than anyone else there, because of what he can do. So if this were the off season, could they get him moved to Winnipeg? I think without a doubt.
Yeah.
They'd work something out. But now we're in the middle of the season,
Yeah,
so
he gave them an out. He said he was prepared to stay with the Islanders till the end of the season. I think they may avail themselves of that, because if you look, Minnesota, Jonas Brodin, are you going to trade Jonas Brodin for Hamonic, or Jacob Trouba with Winnipeg? Or, the only deals that these teams are going to make are that they're going to make deals that are beneficial to them. Edmonton would love to get rid of Justin Schultz for Travis Hamonic. You're trading a defenseman who can play defense for one who can't. But so I think you're right, Kevin. I think more than likely, a deal would be easier in the off season. The only thing that I think the Islanders have to worry about is the fact that they'll be making a trade with a gun to their head, because all these other teams are going to know they have to trade him, so they're not going to give him equal value. But I think that there's less of a chance of that. But so do you think that this will happen before the deadline, or do you think this will happen in the off season?
Well, I think it will depend on what they can work out is this third trade, because I think Edmonton certainly would take him, and he could help their team there if they could work something out. But they're in a better position, as we all know, to trade a forward than a defenseman. Although saying that, they've got too many defensemen now. But who on the Edmonton Oilers can go back to the Islanders and help them? And again, the financial aspect of this cannot be diminished either. They have Hamonic in a very good cap-friendly salary hit of just over $3 million.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference. So it's not like you can take a $5 million player back. So it's tricky, and I think it's complicated by the fact that I bet the Islanders would like to be helpful to him because he's a good guy. Everybody says that about him. Right. So I'm sure they're going to try to accommodate him, but I think you're not being loyal to your fan base if you give him up and don't make a good deal. Like, and again, going into the off season, for example, if it was the off season, you could trade him to Winnipeg for a prospects and maybe Mark Stewart, who comes back and he can't replace Hamonic, but he can play on that defense. Meanwhile, you can hunt around and maybe sign a defenseman to play up. I mean, there are a lot of options then. And right now, there aren't a lot of options. So I just think it's, I'll bet this has been the most difficult situation that Garceau has ever been in.
Well, speaking of options, and there were a couple minor waiver claims on Sunday, but I saw an article by James Myrtle in the Globe and Mail, and it's something that I think is symptomatic of what's going on in the NHL right now. Landon Ferraro, long time with the Detroit Red Wings, was claimed by the Boston Bruins on Sunday. Petter Granberg, a 23-year-old defenseman who was a project for the Maple Leafs, was claimed by Nashville, who doesn't really need defense, but they did it because I think they think he's a good long-term prospect. There are a number of players on the NHL rosters who are basically being buried on the 23-man roster because they can't clear waivers, or they will unlikely clear waivers. Guys like Jared Tenorti, Dylan McElrath, Emerson Edom with the Rangers. I mean, Kevin, I don't see how this benefits NHL teams because, especially these players, because they're basically going to be sitting in the press box all the time. And you can't make the argument that, they put them on waivers, they're going to go and play someplace else, because a guy like Frank Corrado, 22-year-old defenseman who was waived by the Canucks to be sent down to the minors, he gets claimed by Toronto. 21 games into the season, Frank Corrado has played 0. No games. Is there any possibility, like not during the season obviously, but this is addressed at the Board of Governors meeting or by the general managers, that this would change? Because I think it's sort of hurting the game in terms of developing these players to be good pros.
Well, obviously this is a Players Association issue though, Mike. They don't want, if you're a borderline player and you can't crack a lineup, they want the ability to get you out of there and get a chance for you to play. Now, that's the theory of it, but you just talked to the practical application of how it works. Now, in Ferraro's case, he may get an opportunity in Boston. And the other thing, too, is that this has become such a young man's game now. Like, with the speed, and Ferraro can skate, so I'm sure they'll give him an opportunity, and there's a shortage of third, fourth line guys that have some offensive ability. And I think we talked about this in the off season about my theory about how the fourth line should be more offensive than it is. That you shouldn't just load it up full of guys who say things like it's a bonus if I score a goal. If I'm a coach and I hear that, I don't want that guy on my team. I don't want a guy who thinks it's a bonus if he scores, that his sole ability is to prevent the other team. And, Ferraro's that kind of guy. And it's funny because, Ferraro, a year ago, I think he might have passed through waivers. Or if he didn't, he would have. But, he ended up having a great season last year in the minors, and then he played well for the Red Wings during the postseason. And now all of a sudden he's valuable. So, your point is well taken, but, it's not something they can do without Players Association cooperation. I don't see the Players Association ever agreeing to that. This is an opportunity for players to get out of an organization where they're stuck.
Well, Russ, the limitations right now is like, for example, Thomas Yurko, he was sent down on a 14-day conditioning stint. He's down with Grand Rapids right now. Frankie Corrado did the same thing with Toronto. He played down there for 2 weeks, came back up, and has been scratched ever since. I mean, do you think this is something this is not just like one or two players. This is like, say, 20 players right now who are being stored on various rosters in the NHL who are not playing. I mean, you would think that this might be an issue for the PA because these players' careers are sort of being stifled.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the PA is going to care that much because the guys are still getting paid. And if these guys were 35-year-old guys, would you be complaining? Probably not. It's, Landon Ferro is a 24-year-old guy, and he's only gotten 17 NHL games, and he only has a point. So while it may seem like Detroit's given up on him, they've given him a lot of chances. He played like 3 AHL seasons. I always felt like he's a quadruple A player now. In a place like Boston, he's going to get opportunity. So this is a way for the Red Wings to do the best thing for the player, to be honest, because they probably knew he wasn't going to pass. And they probably were okay with that, because sometimes hockey teams do that for kids. Now, McElrath, on the other hand, he does have some toughness, so the Rangers are going to keep him around, and they're going to play him 5, 6, 10 games this year, maybe, and that'll be it. And, that's just he's going to be used like that 35-year-old veteran, tough defenseman who might want to start a fight in a game against the Devils late in the season. And, now it's 25-year-old guys that are taking those jobs. That's really the difference that I see.
And, I think they were kind of hoping Ferraro would get through, but I don't think they expected him to get through. But, the difference is, too, and you always have to remember, had the Red Wings had 3 or 4 injuries up front, Ferraro would have played. I mean, he was playing at the start of the year, and, he was capable. He could have been on the third line. He scored a lot of goals in the minors last season. And the same thing with all the guys that we've talked about. With some injuries, they'd be in the lineup. Like the teams that take them generally see them as in their top 25 guys, and the thought is like the guy you just whose name escapes me right now, and the Predators. Like right. I'm sure the Predators are thinking if we got two injuries, and he's better than what we have.
Yeah, I mean he's coming off an Achilles injury, and basically the Leafs are trying to send him down to the Marlies to play maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks, because he played like 7 games with Toronto last year in the NHL, and the previous administration really liked him as a stay-at-home right-hand shot defenseman. I mean, he might be somebody, down the line that could, and I always give the Predators credit. They recognize talent on the blue line. They have a good eye for that. So, maybe this is somebody who can be a bottom pairing guy for them. And, the 7th and 8th defensemen that they had on their roster are guys in their mid-20s who I don't think they would really care if they lost them on waivers. Now, we're entering the time of the year when everybody seems to think, the quarter pole when teams will take stock of what they have and maybe try to address their problems via trade. But you look at the cap numbers, there are 10 teams right now with less than $2 million in cap space. That doesn't really give teams that are maybe looking for a player or two a lot of flexibility to make moves. So, Kevin, again, this is like I know a few years ago we had Brian Burke come out and he was sort of the advocate of what we now have in terms of cap, in terms of salary retention. Do you think that there's any kind of movement maybe down the line that can loosen things up more to allow more transactions to occur?
Well, I think not if the league gets its way, and we wouldn't be able to do it until the next, collective bargaining agreement. So we're still many years away from that. But, essentially what it comes down to is the league felt that it was in the league's best interest if they didn't give general managers, much leeway to rectify their mistakes. Basically they want them to not make those mistakes and not sign guys to long-term contracts. And the way they felt to do it was make it painful if they sign guys to long-term deals. Now the problem with that, as we've all seen, is it creates situations where guys get buried in the minors and they can't escape. It just becomes
traded. His contract gets traded.
Yeah. It creates goofy situations. But I don't see that changing for a while. And but I will say this: if it were up to the general managers and they voted on it, they would all vote for well, maybe not all, but most of them would vote for more salary retention, not just the half that would be allowed. But and it becomes more complicated as well. If if you were allowed to trade and retain all the salary you want, can you imagine how complicated this league would be after a while? Because there'd be stuff carried up 3 and 4 and 5 years in advance, and it'd be 3 or 4 guys that
I was going to say this has turned into like my childhood. My dad gives me an allowance, I run out of my allowance. Now I'm trying to borrow against
the next allowance. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. So, but it is interesting. You brought up an interesting point, Mike, because I just had a conversation with a general manager who basically said that as far as he knew, there was absolutely no trade talk going on, and he laughed about it. I said, "Are you serious?" He goes, "No, I am being serious." He said, I sometimes I just like to hear what the rumors are. He said, I'm not really in the market for anything because I can't because he was capped out. But he said, and I've asked GMs, and as far as he knew, he said there wasn't anything going on except for minor stuff, So, and boy, when was that? The last time you heard that? Someone say there were no trade talks going on.
The only one who's admitted that he's willing to talk and had a few discussions with Joe Sakic.
Yeah, but here's what I say about that. Now, I don't know. I haven't talked to Joe, but other GMs believe that was put out there to light a fire under his team, that he really had no intention. Because, the discussion about Matt Duchene, from what I've been told, was, hey, if we decided to trade him, what could we get for him?
Right. Now,
that doesn't sound like someone who's all that serious about moving him. And, I think they were trying to light a fire under a team that had underperformed and see what would happen. So
it worked for 3 or 4 games, and now they've gone right back to where they were.
Yeah.
Their performance in
Washington. You got to make NBA deals, Kev. You got to match up salaries. It's the only way it's going to happen.
No, and I think there will be some trades too. Just because there was no trade talk, when I talked to the guy 4 days ago, doesn't mean that now that it hasn't heated up. Because there are some guys that are going to get moved. There's no doubt about it. So
the other name that popped up last week was Marleau, and we've talked about. We've talked about Marleau till we're blue in the face. So I take the approach that I'll believe a Marleau trade when he gets traded, not the rumor. But the thing is now San Jose is playing well. They're leading. I'm sure.
Yeah, I saw the way he still fits into the team the other night, and it's hard to imagine they are going to really trade him. To be honest, you're right.
Yeah. Well, it's if they do trade him, to me it would be just to change for change's sake almost. That's a little bit of an oversimplification, but this team has had some staleness to it that I thought for the first time last summer Doug Wilson made an effort to rid himself of the staleness by changing the goalie, which to me is the easiest way to change up a team. Bringing in Joel Ward, good character, usually a popular guy in the dressing room. That changes everything up. Pavelski obviously now is the captain, and then of course he changed the defense up by bringing in Paul Martin, and Paul Martin's a kind of a minutes guy who does sort of everything well. So he did a real good job. So if you're going to trade Marleau, to me that would be an extension of that because he's still productive. The team is now performing pretty well. The issue is he's sort of been the symbol of their sort of lack of playoff success. You will find some folks around the NHL who say that Marleau's a good player. He's just not a winning type player. He's not a Taves or a Yzerman. He's not the type of guy that will stretch his talents in order to be successful or to win a cup. Now, whether that's fair or unfair, I have no idea because you generally don't know whether a guy is that kind of guy until they get to the finals, and they haven't been there yet.
Yeah, I think at this point in his career, he's more of a complimentary guy than he may be good on a top line, but I think more as a secondary guy than a top guy. Just to finish off the point about the cap numbers, most of the teams in the bottom 10 of the league in terms of cap space are all budget teams. So, even though Arizona has $12 million or Winnipeg has $14 million, they're on budgets, and like a team like Winnipeg, they're going to sign, RFA guys like Scheifele and Trouba, so they don't actually have that kind of room. The one team, and I keep coming back to them because I cover them, Toronto has got over $6 million in cap space, and they essentially are, they're open for business because they put a guy like Nathan Horton on the long-term injury to open up space to make deals.
I think they're doing it for a goalie, though, Toronto. That's what it seems like now, and that makes it a little more limited. I don't think they're open for business for everything, Mike. That's just my feeling, but I think it's really just for a goalie that they're sort of looking for.
Well, it's interesting. Well, the one thing that's interesting about the Maple Leafs is the perception around the league about where they're at now, and I find it interesting that I was talking to a GM about Mike Babcock's performance, and he said something I thought was interesting. I said, well, it hasn't been as easy as I'm sure it was in Detroit for him, and he said, I don't think it's ever easy for Mike Babcock, but he said, everybody watches the Maple Leafs now can tell the difference. He said they don't have any ability. He said, but that team competes. They're in it to try to win it, if nothing else. And Reimer has given them a lift. He's played pretty well. Whether he could sustain that, is that sustainable?
They propped him back up enough to trade him. That's for sure. I mean, before Babcock was there, Reimer was untradeable. So Babcock certainly revived his career.
And Russ, I was up in Toronto on yesterday, and I talked to a couple reporters, and that appears to be the consensus of where things are going. It's not like all of a sudden James Reimer is going to be the guy that they're going to build around and they're going to sign to a long-term extension. This is more, we're playing the guy who's having, who's playing better. Bernier's had his problems. He had his injury problem. Now he's having problems with confidence. Reimer is taking the ball and running with it. He's a UFA. He believes in his bones that he's an NHL starter. I don't think he's going to get that opportunity on a long-term basis in Toronto, and because of that, he will probably go someplace else as a UFA, and if he's leaving, they're going to trade him as an asset. But what you said, Kevin, yeah, this is night and day for the Leafs. I mean, they're a team that is trying. Everybody is trying. Everybody is defense and possession of the puck are paramount with this team. They just don't have enough people to score. 12 out of the 21 games this year, they've scored 2 goals or less. And Reimer is standing on his head right now. 2 weeks from now, when he's playing like Reimer normally plays, and I'm not insulting him, but he's basically been an up-and-down goaltender throughout his career. When he's letting in 3 goals or 4 goals a game, this team will be losing a lot of games.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said there. It is a struggle for them to score goals. I just don't know where they're going to trade Reimer.
Right.
An injury will probably have to occur.
Yeah.
And I don't think. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
No, I mean, I just think that it's so hard to trade a goalie, and it's harder to trade him in season unless there is some catastrophic injury. If Winnipeg lost another goalie, for example, then it makes some sense. Calgary's not. The Flames can't be real happy with how things are going there, but it's just not. Usually, it's not easy to move a goalie during in season.
On the flip side, though, Mike, the Rangers are off to the best start in franchise history, their best 20 games in franchise history, and yet Lundqvist is calling out the team, and I like what he's doing because, look, for many years we've known that the Rangers were going as far as Henrik Lundqvist would take them, and now it seems like even with this great record and Lundqvist even elevating his game a little more, that he doesn't like the fact that his defense is prone to giving up, tying, and go behind and has to come from behind to win games. So he doesn't like the fact that they're giving up goals that tie the game. He doesn't like the fact that they're giving up the lead and they're always having to fight back because he realizes, hey, he can't do it every night. Once in a while, they have to come through, and he's seen a bad trend and he's called out his team for it. even that game against Tampa, they couldn't have played much better. Tampa won 2-1. Tampa's just a little bit faster, and Bishop, for whatever reason, is in their heads right now. And so I give Lundqvist a lot of credit. He, you would think, hey, 15-3-2. I mean, what could you say about the Rangers? But he said it.
Yeah, here's what I say about the Rangers, and I just actually wrote this. Like, who's been more impressive, the Canadiens or the Rangers? Well, I think the Canadiens have been more impressive because we didn't expect that they would have the offense that they've shown. And they've been able to do it without Carey Price. They've hung in there. They've still thrived. So they're more impressive. But who do I think is the better team? I think it's the Rangers. And I say it for this reason. They haven't come close to playing their best hockey. And they lead the NHL with a goals against average of under 2 goals per game. And, last year we saw the, yet again, offense versus defense in the Stanley Cup final, and we know who won. Right. Defense won again. And the Rangers have that ability. Now, I agree, they've been sloppy. As I said, they haven't come close to playing their best hockey. But it's there. We know it's there. We've seen it before. Lundqvist knows it's there. That's why he's calling them out. Yeah. Right now, as impressed as I am with the Canadiens, and I am really impressed with how they play, I think the Rangers are better set up to make a run at the Cup. So.
Well, no, I agree. There's 4 or 5 guys, Nash is maybe coming around with the hat trick. We have to see. Kreider could be a lot better. They haven't gotten anything out of Emerson Edom at all. A little bit out of Miller. They probably expect a little more out of Miller. I mean, there's a lot of guys that could really still step up here. And, the one guy who deserves a lot of credit, though, in really solidifying this year's defense is Keith Yandel. Because while Dan Girardi has slipped a little and Mark Stahl has slipped just a little, I mean, I was just talking about Darrelle Revis slipping a little in the NFL. These guys do over time, but Yandel has really fit in now and really stepped it up, and that has made a huge difference to their defense.
Well, Russ, let me ask you, because we talked about this during the summer, seeing that Yandel, he's having half of his salary paid by the Coyotes. He's a UFA at the end of the year, and we speculated that maybe the Rangers would use him as a piece to move at the deadline, but that really doesn't make any sense because he's playing so well and he's part of that team. What are the prospects of maybe him getting extended?
I think the prospects are there because Jeff Gordon likes him. He's a Massachusetts guy. Gordon's a Massachusetts guy. He always wanted him in Boston when he was in Boston. Now he's in New York. He's got him in New York. I think he will try and hold on to him, and I think he's going to tell Yandel to sort of, stay put for a little while and be, and it might be one of those things where it happens a few weeks before the draft and maybe they trade somebody. Maybe, they're going to have to lop off a little off the cap, but I think there's a chance he does get extended now.
And Boyle's money drops off at the
Boyle's money drops off. Yeah, Tanner Glass drops off.
No, I've been a harsh critic of Montreal, probably because of my.
You've been the worst critic of Montreal.
Probably because of my Leaf sentiment, and I have to give them a lot of credit, though. I mean, they're at the top of the league right now with 34 points, in spite of Carey Price being out for I think it was 3 weeks. They get Price back, and Kevin, they lose Brendan Gallagher probably for close to 2 months with 2 broken fingers. He's having surgery today. He's out. The Alexander Semin experiment has failed miserably. I mean, apparently he's in Terrian's doghouse, and once you get in Terrian's doghouse, you're never getting out of it. But Bergevin's one of the best GMs in the league. I mean, does he just ride out, Gallagher's injury and just try to, survive with Semin in and out of the lineup, or does he maybe, start to look for opportunities to add something?
Well, I think he will look because I think he's an aggressive general manager. But it's like we've talked about. It is difficult, and one thing I like about Bergevin, in addition to the fact he's extremely funny, is he's also very honest. And in the summer when everybody was talking about they had to get a big center and all that, he basically turned it back on the reporters. And what GMs often say privately is that reporters sometimes play the role of fans and act as if, you got to get this and you got to get that. But he said, okay, well, where are the big centers? Well, tell me where I'm going to be able to trade, for a big center. It's not exact like every team out there is looking to move a big center. So, and I think that's what I would think that he'll be looking at here is that he knows it's impossible really to replace the type of player that Gallagher is. You know, the players like Gallagher, the super pest, aggressive, offensively. You know, he's a decent offensive contributor in addition to being a super pass. They're just not available. So I think they'll try to ride it out, but if they don't, and he finds a way that he can at least offset the loss of Gallagher, he won't be able to replace him, but maybe he can find someone who can do something else, then I think he will make a move. And, you know, maybe Tenori is a piece that gets moved for that.
Yeah, I could see that. But like I had told you, Mike, Below is really fit into the point now where he's not going anywhere in any kind of deal ever. But I will tell you, you know what a good pickup for them was Paul Byron. They picked him up from Calgary on waivers, and he's a little bit of a small guy, and that's the first thing everybody wants to say about him. But he's fit right in on their bottom line. He's +3. He's got 3 points in 10 games, and he's playing every game. And so Bergevin deserves credit. While he took a chance with Semin, it was a low-cost chance, and maybe he'll get him back in there. He tweaked Galchenyuk the right way, and he's playing him at the right position. He had Princeton's Mike Condon come in and really do a nice job. I'd forgotten I had even covered Mike Condon, and I looked back at my notes in 2010, and I did, and I liked what I saw, and I put a little scouting report out there as he was making his little run now, because you sometimes forget about these guys, and all of those things have been important to where the Canadiens are right now, and so they're scoring a few more goals, but they're still the same system team that I was trying to sell you on last year, and that's the thing that hasn't changed. And Terrien, look, he's not burning his bridges like he used to, and he is a good coach. We all know he's a good coach, and he's doing a great job. Right now, he might be the coach of the year. We'll see. And
Price can cover up an awful lot of
Sure.
sins for a team. And I know that Smith Pelly is also out for them. I'm not sure the extent of the injury, but they do have a couple young players down with St. John's they can call up. I know Delarose who played about half of the year last year and played most of the playoffs.
Yeah, he'll get a call up, I'm sure.
Yeah, got off to a slow start. Maybe he'll get called up. In the West, the team that's sort of been challenged by injuries but still is up there in terms of their record. I mean, they're not in first place in the Central, but they have 28 points, is the St. Louis Blues. I'm stunned that they have been able to have that kind of record without Stastny, without Shattenkirk for a while, with the injury to Berglund, and there was the other injury that I'm striking out on right now. Jaden Schwartz. I mean, Kevin, I'm really surprised that they've been able to get through all that and still be near the top of the Central Division.
Well, it is interesting. That whole Central Division, first of all, like I've been saying, that it really doesn't matter who's 1 through 5 there, because all 5 of those teams are contending teams, and they have a chance to reach the Stanley Cup final. And I really believe it. And I think it's going to be a 5-3. Getting into the playoffs, 3 from the Pacific, and 5 teams, and a good team like Winnipeg, or I don't know if they're a good team, but they're a competitive team. They're going to lose out, I think. But Chicago, they're struggling to make hay and get to the top. But who wants to face them? They know a lot about it. But I do agree with what you're saying about St. Louis. They've had not just injuries, but really key injuries. Like sometimes when a team has a lot of injuries, well, it's a lot of third and fourth line guys or core guys are still okay. That's not the case. Jaden Schwartz was a very important part. Shattenkirk was out for an extended period of time. Tarasenko was out. They've had numerous guys that have been out of the lineup. And Jake Allen has performed this season. For some reason, even though I think players have gotten a little weary of Hitch's style, they're playing for him. But unfortunately, if you're the Blues, you're going to be judged by one thing, and that's how you perform in the playoffs. It doesn't matter how well they do; they can win the division. But when we get to April, what we're going to all say is, "All right, show me. You're from Missouri. Show me." It's this is it's about the playoffs for them. It doesn't matter what they do in the regular season.
Yeah, this team is a defensive team. They're like the 85 Bears. I mean, that's what they are. They get good goaltending. They have great defense. They score some goals. Right now, it's Tarasenko's team. Colton Parayko could win the Calder, right? And who would have thought that? and this is a kid he's leading their defensemen in points. Like, they have some pretty good defensemen, and he's leading them in points. He's got more than Shattenkirk. He's got more than Bouwmeester. He's got more than Peter Angelo. So when you sort of look at that, you say, good for Hitchcock. He has made it so that his defense could handle a game, and they don't have to score a ton of goals to win, and their goaltending's been good enough to do that. Now, I don't know if that's going to go through and that's going to happen in the postseason, but they'll get players back, so I don't think that's a big deal right now.
Kevin, we haven't talked to you since the announcement was made regarding the new All-Star format, and I know that I've always been the harshest of critics of that as well, but I actually was intrigued by this, by the 3-on-3 and by the divisional format. I'm willing to give this an opportunity because it sounds interesting. I mean, I'm interested in your perspective, what you thought of it.
Well, I've always viewed the All-Star game a little bit differently than most. I see it as the annual NHL convention where we all get together and talk about the state of the game, and then we have a little exhibition for the kids and for sponsors that has not been competitive for a couple of decades. And it used to be competitive, but that was prior toward the the realization is not the right word, but for everyone to agree that you don't want to risk injury in these type of things. I think the 3-on-3 concept is interesting. I think for at least a couple or 3 seasons it will be. I wonder whether or not there will be this great feeling of team, by divisions. I don't sense that guys identify with what division they'll be in, but we'll see. But I think the 3-on-3 we've all found it entertaining in the overtime, so why not try it? It's at least the way to go. I still think, and they won't go this way because of the risk of injury, but I still think if they want a competitive All-Star, they should turn it into an international event. They should challenge the KHL to send their All-Star team over.
I like it.
And bring in the top 23 guys, 23-person roster. But the problem is they won't do that because if it's a real game, they can risk injury. But if they really want to make it competitive, that would do it. And it doesn't have to be the KHL every year. It could be Team Finland, it could be Team Sweden. You could do. There are many ways you can go to make this competitive. But I say this is a good try, and I think whatever you can do to spice it up, it can be fun. I think it would have been more interesting, as I said, if you put a together by maybe a or a veteran team, a young team, a team with 5 Canadians on it. That to me it would have been more interesting if you could have found a little bit a way to sort of make the allegiances more true than by division. But the problem with that is then you got to play more games because the teams would have to be smaller. So, I mean, I understand it all. But I say this is a good try, and it was a good effort. And, I'm glad that the PA and NHL could work together. Obviously, they had to give up something to get it. But
yeah, the funny thing is what they gave up. I mean, for people who don't know, they gave up basically a 5-day bye week for each team during the season. But, like, for example, I looked at the Toronto schedule this year. They have 2 5-day bye weeks already. They have 2 gaps in the schedule where they played Saturday and then they don't play their next game until the following Saturday. So, I mean, I think this is sort of like the NHL gave up something that was really like a non-issue for them. Now, maybe other teams don't have that gap, but I think most of them do. So.
Yeah, but it's significant, though, because you can't practice.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the big issue for the players. You have a bye week that's a legitimate bye week where you're off. So, I mean, you can plan accordingly. Once you know your bye week, you can take the family to Disney World. Mm-hmm. So it was a big issue for players, and I thought it was a great compromise. They worked it out. I mean, you give the players something, and now they allowed you to change the All-Star format.
All right, Mike, I got big news. Jacques Demers sent Twitter aflutter with the Canadiens alumni team for the Winter Classic. I got to mention the lineup. This is a pretty good lineup.
Okay.
First line is Benoit Brunet, Guy Carbonneau, Mike Keane. Mike Keane's been playing for a million years, so he's probably going to be pretty good in this game. I like the second line, though. Mats Naslund, Alex Kovalev, Ole Petrov. Not bad. Third line is Steve Shutt, Norman DuPont, Stefan Richer. Stefan Richer is great. I like that.
You better have the oxygen masks ready for that one.
Sergio Momesso, Donald Audette, and Chris Nyland. That's a heck of a fourth line right there. Nobody's messing with that fourth line.
Is Chris Nyland going to switch jerseys between periods?
Maybe. Jose Theodore and Richard Sevigny. I mean, Theodore is going to be terrific. He's not that old. I mean, that's a good one. Here's the defense. Larry Robinson and Eric Desjardins. I like that. That's a heck of a pairing right there. Hold on, my mouse just froze. All right. And then we got Gaston Gingras and Patrice Brisbois. Brisbois not that old. That's pretty good.
Well, a little light on the defense there. Gaston Gingras and Patrice Brisbois.
Rick Green and Gilbert Delorme. And then Lyle Odeline and Stefan Quintal. That one's interesting. I like the Odeline Quintal. And so that's, now we'll see who the Bruins put out there. But they've mixed it with really a couple of really old legends that, like Larry Robinson and Steve Shutt. But then they mixed it with some guys that could still play.
Well, we know Quintal won't get suspended.
I guarantee you Stefan Richer can shoot. I guarantee you. That's all he could do.
I wanted to finish up because I went on Thursday, Kevin. I went up to St. Catharines to watch the Erie Otters and the Niagara Ice Dogs play. I wanted to get another look at Alex DeBrincat right now, who's leading, the Detroit native who's leading the CHL with 27 goals. And
how is this possible?
Yeah, I know, but I talked briefly with somebody who works for an NHL team. DeBrincat got hit in the first period by a Niagara forward. It was, he got hit along the wall, and he was okay. It was no problem. But I asked him what his thoughts were of DeBrincat, and he says, for a guy his size, he's not as elusive as like the smaller guys who are in the NHL right now. And I'm just wondering, is there still this bias against the smaller player? Are there still skeptics in the league that won't draft a guy who's 5'9" and 160 pounds?
Well, no, I don't think so, because Goudreau, I think has helped that as well. I mean, they were saying it's hard. Goudreau's ability to find seams in defense is not one of the quantifiable abilities that scouts can, they can mention it, but you can't really sort of compare it to everyone else's. And so to me, that's what it is. I mean, I know what he's saying. He's not as elusive in terms of he can't escape some of the hits, but if he obviously is finding the soft spots in the defense to score that many goals. And I talked to a guy about him, former NHL general manager, who said that he felt the kid will play in the league and he'll be a scorer. So we'll see. He's so small. He's so small.
He is, but here's the thing though, and I did ask him about this at the All-American Prospects game. His dad is a little stockier than he is, so he does feel like he's going to fill out a little bit. But the point is, if he were 6 foot, 180 pounds, he'd be a top 5 pick with the numbers he's putting up.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, he's certainly a good player. I do think though that the other American that everyone's sort of buzzing about is, now I'm drawing a complete blank. Russ, help me out. The national Clayton Keller.
Oh, Clayton Keller. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of scouts are real impressed with him. He's not very big either. He's a little bigger, but he's a guy that's, I think, is getting a lot of buzz. I think a lot of people think he's climbed into the top 15 now as well. So
there'll be a few more too. Adam Fox is another one that I've been talking to people about. He played in the All-American Prospects game. He showed great in Finland. There's going to be quite a few. I've had a few people tell me this top 11 in this draft are going to be pretty special, and I agree with that. Like, it's going to be a deep first round, but the top 11 could be really special, and so that's something that's sort of interesting too.
Yeah, and there's a Canadian kid who plays for Flint, William Bitton, who had a hat trick yesterday against Erie. He's, I believe, 5'7" and 145 pounds. At least that's what Hockey DB reports him as. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like these players who are really small. I mean, I don't think it's going to prevent them from being drafted. I think, like with DeBrincat, it may prevent them from being drafted where if they were a little bigger where they should be drafted. So, I mean, we won't find that out until next June, but it's interesting to look at.
I'll tell you, though, to me, the game is so fast now.
Yeah.
That's taken over from size. Like,
I would think so too, Kev, but it does seem like there's still a little bit of bias there. Not that he can't make the league now. Everybody pretty much admits, hey, the kid can make the league. But now it's just a matter of, are you going to take him with a top 10 pick, or are you going to wait for your second first-round pick and take him like 22nd?
That makes sense. I mean, always you're going to take the bigger guy if it's close. I don't think that'll ever change. So
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, great show, guys. We'll have Eck back tomorrow. He is in Florida enjoying the sun. It's 29 degrees in Buffalo, so I hate him because it's 75 in Florida. So, for Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.